I'd like to offer my congratulations to Roger and thanks, not just for giving me a chance to serve this party in Brussels and Strasbourg, but for his obvious and genuine commitment over the years, not just to UKIP, but to Brexit in general. I was able to speak in the first of my plenary meetings in Strasbourg 3 weeks ago. And when I mentioned Roger Helmer as an expert on energy, you ought to see the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats and everything booing away and not liking this at all. And this is because Roger had that sort of effect in Parliament, because Roger knew his stuff and he used to rip them apart. I'd also like to say a very quick thank you to all the MEPs who work so hard in Brussels. I've seen it firsthand now. There's a lot of unsung heroes there. I've not just been welcomed, obviously, by Nigel as group leader, but also by Ray Finch, who undercover works so hard over there, and the rest of the MEPs, beavering away, voting, working hard. People like, for example, Jonathan Arnott, who I saw when that budget came out just a few days away. Within 2 hours, he'd used his mathematical analysis to come up with a sort of 2-page brief on that budget, and then work into the night to put a press release out and get our message across. So there's a lot of good people there. We've got another Strasbourg week coming up next week with can you believe it, a debate on Brexit, which we'll be taking part in. Nigel will be leading on that as well. And I'm looking forward to the opportunity and chance to make a contribution to that and secure a clean Brexit. Thank you very much indeed.
Now, so we come next to a speaker, a man who I've quietly admired and envied over the years. He was in the room on day one of UKIP, imagine that. Can't take that away from him, it's great. Now, many of us may think that David Davis just ought to come home and stop taking calls, and that would be the simplest answer. But to tell us in a bit more detail about how that should look, please welcome Gerard Batten.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Lovely to see you all here. I got here today and I looked at our brochure and I realised there's a little misprint in it. Now, if you look on the back, it says Brexit means Brexit. A slight error. What does Brexit mean? Brexit means Brexit. It doesn't mean anything else. Brexit either means exit from the European Union or it means nothing at all. It certainly doesn't mean being half in the European Union and half out, and it certainly doesn't mean ending up with a withdrawal agreement where we leave in name but we don't leave in reality. Now, what's actually happened in the 15 months since the referendum decision? Well, for the first 7 months, nothing happened at all. And then in January, Mrs May made a speech, which was mostly waffle, it has to be said, but at least she confirmed that we'd be leaving the single market and the customs union. And then finally in March this year, she got around to triggering Article 50. Now, since then, the government have published 14 position papers on different policy areas, most of them merely aspirational in nature and not very specific. On the 22nd of September, last Friday, Mrs May made a speech in Florence, laying out her plan for what she calls our new relationship with the European Union. Now, the first half of the speech was inconsequential niceties about Europe, and as many people still seem to do, Mrs May confuses the political construction, which is the European Union, with the continent of Europe. Now, halfway through the speech, Mrs May got on to some specifics of what her proposed new relationship with the EU might look like. And there were 3 main elements to this. There was the economic partnership, the security relationship, and then the implementation of the final withdrawal agreement. Now, let me consider these main points with you. Now, regarding the economic partnership, Mrs May again stated that we were leaving the single market and the customs union. So far, so good. But from there on, her proposals were a bit vague. She ruled out membership of the European Economic Area, which is good, but she also ruled out a traditional free trade agreement. She said she wanted something more, she wanted a more creative solution, but couldn't explain what it actually might look like. So we're actually none the wiser. Regarding the proposed security relationship, this was quite ominous in nature. What she wants is a new treaty between the UK and the EU, which will not only enshrine our existing involvement with the EU security and defence policy, but also, as Mrs May puts it, I quote, go beyond the existing arrangements the EU has in this area. Mrs May's new treaty proposes a bold new strategic arrangement for security, law enforcement and criminal justice cooperation. Now think what this means. It means Britain will be committed to the EU's foreign, security and defence policy.
No. No.
It means the continuing absorption of Britain's armed forces into the EU's...
Never! Never!
Don't shoot the messenger, please. It will mean that we're going to be committed to being part of the EU's own developing police and criminal justice.
No.
It means keeping all the EU's legal instruments, such as the European Arrest Warrant, the European Investigation Order, to name two of many. And it means that we will continue to be part of Europol, the EU's emerging police force, and all the other EU legal institutions.
No.
Now soon the EU is going to have its own public prosecutor. The UK has an opt-out from that and it's worthless. Let me explain why. The prosecutor will be able to exert their authority by means of the EU's existing legal institutions and instruments through national authorities. Now, I asked this question at a committee meeting last Monday, and I got the first time ever I can remember, I got the nearest thing to a straight answer. I asked if the opt-out can be circumvented by the existing legal instruments, and the Commission representative there took a rather long time to say it, but he said yes. So I was very pleased to get a straight answer for once. Now, the legal instruments and the legal institutions have undermined our traditional freedoms and liberties under our law, and Mrs May intends that we keep them all after we leave the EU. Now, regarding the implementation period of the withdrawal agreement, the implementation of the withdrawal agreement, Mrs May proposes the following. Nothing is going to change up until we leave the EU on the 29th of March. Now, after that, she says that we will no longer be members of the European Council, the Council of Ministers, and we will no longer have members of the European Parliament. All well and good, but not much else seems to change. After the 29th of March 2019, there will follow a period of implementation or transition, which might be 2 years, and it might be longer. Up to March 2019, we will continue to pay our contributions to the EU budget, which currently run after the rebate between 14 to 15 billion per annum. And it seems likely that the EU will expect us to pay billions more during the implementation period. We don't know, and Mrs May didn't deny it. Now, another subject Mrs May touched on was the open borders and immigration from the EU. And this, of course, was one of the major issues during the referendum campaign. Mrs May proposes no controls at all up to March 2019 or during her further 2-year implementation period, as far as we can tell. But never mind that, because what she does propose is a system of registering migrants so that we know who they are before she works out what her controls are going to be afterwards at some point in the future. So in summary, what can we say about what Mrs May told us on the 22nd of September? She wants an imaginative trade deal with the EU, but can't tell us what it might consist of. She intends to bind us to the EU's foreign policy and military ambitions. She intends to bind us to the EU's police and criminal justice system. And she proposes no controls on EU migration until at least about mid-2021, and cannot tell us what those controls might look like. And she also told us that we are going to continue to be subject to the Court of Justice of the European Union to a greater or lesser degree after we leave. We don't yet know.
No. We won't accept it.
Essentially, nothing is going to happen for 5 years after the referendum, and a great deal will stay the same. So far, Mrs May's handling of Brexit has been a total and utter shambles. And she's showing herself to be Teresa the Appeaser. Now, actually, very quickly I'll mention the government published 2 white papers earlier on in the year, one in March, which were legislating for the UK's withdrawal from the EU, made it plain that all EU law will remain in place after we leave, and the decisions of the Court of Justice of the European Union will continue to apply, and that's the government white paper. So what is the EU saying to all this in response? Of course, they don't want us to leave. Why would they? They need our financial contributions, and they need us to share in their liabilities, which may be very considerable. The EU has no incentive whatsoever to agree a mutually beneficial withdrawal agreement. They have every incentive to delay our exit and to make it as difficult as possible and to delay it as long as possible. Now, Mr Barnier, their chief negotiator, has said that we will have to pay them €100 million for the privilege of leaving. Now, Mr Verhofstadt, the European Parliament's representative in the negotiations, says a great many things, and I have to listen to them. Now, one of the things he said is that any European citizen who ever set foot in the UK and their children should continue to have access to our benefits and public housing system, our education and health system, and anything else that he can think of for life.
The man's nuts.
And given that the oldest inhabitant of Europe died a few months ago, aged 117, we might find ourselves still arguing about this in 100 years' time. Oh, and he was on the news last night. I think it was last night. Yes, it was. It was brilliant. He said, Brexit is negative. Why would we want to leave something that had made us all richer and freer? Well, actually, it's very, very positive for us. It might be a bit negative for them. It made us richer and freer after the billions wasted, after losing our fishing industry, after paying a deal of food because we can't buy food on the way. And freer when any British citizen can be carted off to any Mickey Mouse EU state on the basis of allegations on a sheet of paper, unsubstantiated by evidence, called the European Arrest Warrant. That makes us freer.
You must be joking.
Now, Mr Tusk, the President of the Council, talks to our government as though they were naughty and ungrateful school children. He tells them that we cannot have our cake and eat it. And when Mrs May makes concessions, he just comes back and says that they're not enough. He wants yet more concessions. And of course, Mr Jean-Claude Juncker, the President of the Commission, the godfather of the EU, tells us that it's a decision we will live to regret. And then last week, or the week before, he reveals his plans for full financial, economic, political and military integration. If the British people had voted to remain in the European Union in June 2016, they would have shared in that fate. That is where we would all be heading. Yeah. So it's full steam ahead for a United States of Europe. And what is our government and Parliament doing about all this? No. Mrs May was a Remainer, and she's now entrusted with a task that she doesn't believe in. A majority of both houses of Parliament don't want us to leave. And I believe that they intend to engineer one of two outcomes. Either they want to arrive at a withdrawal agreement whereby we leave the EU in name but not in reality, with some kind of associated status which means or would allow us to rejoin in a few years' time, or they hope to delay the leaving process long enough to eventually be able to disregard the decision of the referendum altogether. The great danger is that our leaving of the European Union will be delayed right up until the eve of the next general election. And Mrs May, if she survives, may go into that election saying, vote for me, and we don't really leaving withdrawal agreement. You can follow that. Or you get Jeremy Corbyn and he's read in tooth and claw Marxists. What a choice that's going to be. And if Labour wins, we might find that they claim under their new mandate from the people that they can ignore the referendum decision altogether. Now, we don't know exactly what will happen, but Brexit is in danger of being betrayed. So that's all the bad news. So now I've got some good news about how it could be done quickly and decisively, how we can leave the European Union. And all our government needs is the will and the courage to take it. Now, I've described that in detail in my EU exit plan, which has been out for a year now, and you can download it from my website. But let me summarise it very quickly. Number one, Parliament should immediately repeal the European Communities Act 1972. That's the first step. Then we would have left under our law. All EU-derived law has already been incorporated into UK law by means of Acts of Parliament, etc., and it would remain temporarily in place under the repeal bill. Our government and Parliament could then set about repealing or amending that legislation in accordance with our own priorities and timescales. Now, there are two big issues to sort out quickly. One, of course, is trade, and the other is the status of EU and UK citizens. Now, regarding trade, it's not complicated. We can offer them two simple choices. A free trade agreement with continued tariff-free trade on the current terms, but where the UK has the freedom to negotiate its own trade deals with the rest of the world, or go to World Trade Organisation terms. We should put that on the table, say, thank you very much, you've got a week to think about it, we'll come back. Decision anyway, so let's make them make it. Now, regarding citizens' rights, we can offer a reciprocal arrangement, but impose our own border controls and immigration controls quickly. Now, it may be necessary to go over the heads of the EU to do this, and offer such a deal unilaterally to the other 27 member states, because although the EU could agree such an arrangement, it can't actually enforce it in its own member states. And if you're an MEP, you understand how EU laws are disregarded in many EU states. Now, regarding security and defence issues, we should immediately withdraw from the EU security and defence policy and all our military involvements with the EU. We have NATO for our mutual defence. Now, we should withdraw from Europol and all the EU's legal institutions and legal instruments. We've got Interpol for international police cooperation. And we can fall back on pre-existing international agreements in police for cooperation in police and criminal justice matters. Now, regarding the many thousands of pieces of EU legislation in place, some we may wish to repeal, some we may wish to amend, and some we may want to keep in place because they're purely technical and allow us to interact with the EU for as long as it survives. And now, one thing I haven't touched on yet is the so-called divorce bill. Now, David Davis can clear that up very quickly. He can go to the European Union and he said, regarding the figure that you want us to agree, I can tell you what it is. It's a big, fat zero.
Yeah, right.
Now, I'm not suggesting that the leaving process is going to be easy or simple, but unless our government seizes the initiative and takes control of the situation, we cannot expect the EU to help us deliver Brexit. That isn't going to happen. Unless we lead by this bold and decisive action which I've described, then I think we're unlikely to ever leave at all. Now, Mrs. may well find, or her successor, may well find that the intransigence of the EU forces her then into the course of action that I've described. So it's much better to do it sooner than to do it later. UKIP's founding policy was to bring about Britain's exit from the European Union. UKIP's electoral threat forced David Cameron to promise to hold the referendum. UKIP's leader, Nigel Farage, and our donors, activists and members delivered the referendum victory on the 23rd of June 2016. It was UKIP what won it. But our exit from the EU is now no closer than it was on the 24th of June 2016. Brexit must not be betrayed. If we want to make Brexit happen, then we have to rebuild UKIP as an electoral threat. And the next stage of our historical struggle is just beginning. Let me finish on something which just occurred to me this afternoon. Does anybody know what today is? The 29th of September. It is the birthday of Vice Admiral Horatio Lord Nelson, our greatest national hero. Now, you all know his famous signal at Trafalgar, but he said something else. I'll paraphrase it, I'll probably get it wrong. But he said to his captains, "No captain can ever go far wrong if he lays himself close to an enemy. Put your ship alongside the enemy." And the last signal that he always gave as the ships went into battle was engage the enemy more closely. And that's our signal. Engage the enemy more closely.